right away, and then we'll, it sounds
Oh,
like.
I did. We've been working on it.
Okay. All right. And
But that
Madeline, you
link-
put your headset.
Okay, we're a few
again, 'cause
seconds
you
away
wanna-
from live now.
Okay. All right, thanks everybody for joining the City of Courtenay for our April 27th, 2020 regular council meeting, as regular as it gets under the current circumstances. We are meeting on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And I'd just like to start with a preamble regarding the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mayor, I'm not hearing you that well. I'm not hearing you that well, Mayor. I don't know if everyone else is hearing it better, but
Less clear than you.
Yeah. Due to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the City of Courtenay, with the authority of Ministerial Order M083, Local Government Meetings and Bylaw Process, COVID-19, has implemented changes to its open council meetings. In the interest of public health and safety, public in-person attendance at council meetings will be prohibited until further notice. Council meetings will be presided in person by the mayor or acting mayor, with electronic participation by members of council and staff. Meetings are available for viewing via live web streaming or video recording on the City of Courtenay website and start at 1 p.m. during this period. I heard a couple people talking. I'm just gonna mute Jennifer and Wendy Moore. Are you guys able to hear me better now? Seem okay? All right, with that, we'll go into the minutes. If somebody would like to
Move adopt.
Councillor Cole Hamilton has moved it.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor McCullum. All right, that's good. And are there any questions or comments regarding that? And I have Councillor Morin.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't sure if my information had gotten through about my activities reports for the last couple meetings, that they were just, some of them were missing in the minutes. So if that could be added, that would be great.
Okay. Thanks very much. Anyone else have any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, although anybody opposed to the minutes, otherwise we'll just consider them accepted. And seeing nobody against them, we'll consider them accepted. Moving along, we do not have any late items or delegations, but we will move into development services. Does somebody want to move the motion for development services?
I can move the motion.
Okay, Councillor McCollum.
I'll move that based on the April 27th, 2020 staff report entitled Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2990-1025 Ryan Road, Council approve option 1 and complete the following steps. That Council give first and second reading of Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2990 to create a new CD 29 or 27 zone and rezone the property legally described as Lot B, Section 14, Comox District Plan VIP 74579 from C-2A to CD-27. And second, that Council that Council directs staff to schedule and advertise a statutory public hearing with respect to the above referenced bylaw following the resumption of regular council meetings. And thirdly, that final reading of the bylaw be withheld pending the registration of Section 219 covenant and completion of the housing agreement.
I'll second that.
Excellent, seconded by Councillor Frisch. All right, and I'll pass it over to staff. Oh, microphone is muted, Mr. Allen. Is that better? That's much better. Thank you. Okay. So I'll turn this over to Matt Fitzgerald, who's our Manager of Development Planning, who can summarize the report and take questions from council.
Thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. First, just confirming everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
Thanks. So this application, the applicant is proposing a 118 unit apartment building at 1025 Ryan Road. The building will be 5 stories with an underground parkade and access from 2 private roadways, which have easements that then connect to Ryan Road. The proposed rezoning will result in a new comprehensive development zone, which is a zone specifically written for this specific development. Second part of this rezoning proposal is the creation of a new rental tenure restrictions within the zoning bylaw. This is a relatively new power municipalities have, and what it means is that the proposed units must remain rental units and cannot be occupied by the owner of the unit. The applicant is also offering, as part of their amenity contribution, 6 affordable units in addition to the per unit contributions specified in the OCP. Staff are recommending the council gives this bylaw first and second reading and proceeds to public hearing once public hearings resume. This recommendation is based on 5 main factors analyzed in detail in the report, which include the compatibility with the surrounding land uses, the city's need for additional rental housing, existing and future connections for all modes of transportation, use of existing infrastructure, and building and site design, which are generally consistent with multifamily development permit guidelines. With that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Excellent. Councillor Frisch. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. How's that?
Much better.
Yeah, so thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to staff for bringing this forward. Certainly encouraged by this application and all the different pieces that come along with it. The one concern, and there's actually a few concerns around transportation that I have. This is actually probably one of the worst areas for alternate transportation. The saving grace, of course, is that the Superstore Plaza's right beside it. But even getting to the Superstore Plaza, if you're not in a car, even if you are in a car, isn't the most comfortable. And you've probably experienced this just walking through the parking lot. You find you're dodging cars the whole time, and so it's fairly similar for this site and its access to the various amenities around it. I'm wondering if staff have any thoughts on the potential multi-use pathway that we had envisioned for an extension of Tunner Drive, and if that's something that's being contemplated at this time. All these people will, of course, have an interest in going downtown at some point, but wouldn't have any comfortable way of doing that. That was a question for staff.
Okay.
Are
Are you guys able to hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So again, I'll turn this either over to Matthew Fitzgerald or to Ian Buck. And we'll start with those 2 staff and go from there.
Thanks through CAO to Mayor and Council. So regarding the extension to the multi-use pathway, there's another parcel. It's 801 Ryan Road, which is the parcel directly behind Superstore. And this parcel is really key to the extension of Tunner, either as a road or as an AT path. So I completely agree that the connection is needed. I think for this property in particular, there's no way to acquire that land or to extend that path, given that it doesn't have frontage or any land needed for that path.
Okay. All right. Next, we have Councillor McCullum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I have a couple questions around this. I certainly echo some of Councillor Frisch's concerns that while this is great to see some residential development being proposed for an area that's so central in Courtenay, and we have had some successful high density developments go in this area, it's very underserved in terms of walkability and bikeability, and even navigating in a car is, pulling out across a road that holds 4 lanes of traffic. So providing some other options for people to get around seems like something we should probably prioritize if we are going to continue to encourage high density development in this area. I guess my first question is, are we expecting, or is there other development proposals in the works for some of the other big parcel of land in and around this this particular proposal.
Can I proceed, Mayor?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Again, back to Matt.
Thanks for the question through the CAO to Mayor and Council. There are two active applications in the immediate area on Hunt Road. There's a rezoning proposal that'll be before council in coming months. That's for a hotel. And then directly across on Braidwood, there's a seniors home facility, which I believe is about 160 unit development. So those are active applications. Lots of other interests in this area, but I can't until they actually make application.
Fair enough. So, I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is that we have some fairly certain ones in the mix, and probably won't be surprised to see more as we go forward. Yeah, I guess this for me just really highlights that I think the city and of course City Council needs to prioritize providing some transportation infrastructure outside of just what's already there. I mean, something that was highlighted in this report was that it's an area with good transportation infrastructure, but in my mind, if we want it attractive for high density development, I think we need to do and plan for a little bit more than what's existing there now. The other question I had was whether or not I didn't see anything listed in terms of amenity contributions. And Councillor Frisch alluded to the multi-use pathway that we're hoping to develop off Tunner Drive. And I'm wondering if the applicant would be subjected to paying any sort of DCCs for any type of park or transportation facilities if this development goes forward.
Again, I don't know if this is a question for Matt or for Ian or even possibly Trevor, depending on you know, the extent of the discussion.
I can take a first stab at it if that's okay. So through CAO to Mayor and Council. So I guess just clarifying the amenity contributions, the applicant is proposing amenities to both the affordable housing as well as the Parks and Recreation amenity funds. For the affordable housing, they're proposing the fees set out in the OCP, which are per unit fee that I'm sure you've all seen before. In addition to that, they're proposing 6 units, which would have is defined as affordable rental rates, and these rates would be protected or protected through a subsequent housing agreement. In terms of the Parks and Recreation Amenity Fund, again, the applicant is proposing that per unit amenity fee that's specified in the.
Great, thank you. And I just have one final question, and it relates to the public hearing and when we could possibly do third reading. And I'm wondering if staff have any indication from the province if we'll be able to do some sort of adapted version of a public hearing, or if this and other applications are going to sit on hold until we get more direction.
Yes, if I might, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, in fact, the mayor and I were part of on a call with Minister Robinson last Thursday, and she brought up the fact that the province is going to be announcing today or tomorrow, it sounds like, relaxation on public hearing requirements so that they can be done electronically. And so we can expect I guess a circular or some kind of guidance document in the next day or two that will provide some clarity and relaxation.
Great, that's great news. Thank you.
All right, next we have Councillor Hillian. Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to staff for the report. I'll support this resolution. Pleased to see the development, and two of my questions have been answered already. The remaining one, though, is in relation to the 6 units of housing where there will be a covenant to guarantee their affordability. I'm just wondering if staff could clarify. That's an arrangement, I believe, through a provincial government program. Is 6 the maximum number that the program covers, or is this simply a number that was determined by the developer as something they could make work in their financing of the project?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, again, this is a question I think for Matt.
Thank you, through CEO to Mayor and Council. So the 6 units isn't tied to a program. It's what the developer offered.
Okay, and is that something that's negotiable, or could we ask for more units? I note that there's a number in the $800 level, which is the rent, and while that is affordable by some standards, it's not by others. But I think the more rents we can get that are reasonable, the better it'll be. And I'd also like to see a mix. There's a significant mix in the development already, but I'm just wondering what determination they made to come up with the number 6.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's just probably based on the financing of the building and what they're prepared to have at lower rents than they could otherwise charge. I think that was probably the dominant factor in determining the 6 units. Council can ask for more, but what I would highlight is this is I think a good offer. It's more than we've seen with other proposals, and it's also the first in the city to be using the new rental tenure zoning. So that will protect this from being converted to condo units.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And I know this developer has built a couple of other rental properties in the last few years, and I believe is the proponent behind one of the apartment complexes on the other side of Ryan Road. So I do think we want to support his work. I would also add my comments that I'd certainly support some of the amenity contributions to going into improved walkability in the area. So thanks for that.
All right, and next we have Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, of course, that I'm very happy with the affordable housing pieces and the bicycle parking. I really appreciate the developer seeing the value in that. I wanted to ask about the amenity contribution for parks. In my recollection, our parks plan does highlight an east-west connection. Would a project such as the Tunner Drive alternative transportation corridor fit into that funding?
Mr. Allen? Yeah, I don't think we have Dave Snyder here, and I don't know, Trevor, if you're able to weigh in on this or whether it's a question for Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, David. I can certainly weigh in a little bit. I think Ian might be able to answer that question in terms of the funding. I know it's not a project that's in our DCC bylaw right now, but it is certainly a project that's staff are working with the ministry staff this year for potential conceptual designs and moving forward with design in 2021. Council will recall that Comox Road widening phase 1, which is from 17th Street Bridge, just the beginning of the S curves is phase 1, and phase 2 is moving towards Ryan Road, which will also include the Tunner Drive. So that's being contemplated for next year, but we are having initial discussions.
Sure, and yeah, that seems like a wise discussion to bring to council sooner than later, so we can solidify what sort of intersection we'd be looking at. on the bypass. I also want to make a comment about the traffic study. It's a little bit antiquated. You know, it talks about car traffic exclusively, and doesn't incorporate anything else. So I think you know, as we move forward on our OCP, I don't actually know where it fits in, if it's in our development bylaw or what. But we really need a transportation study, not just a car movement study in the future. Thanks for all the work anyways.
I just wonder if Ian has any comments on that issue in particular.
Sure.
Sure, thanks. Through the CEO to Mayor and Council. For sure, with any of our studies, we set the terms of reference. So if there's a desire, and I think it is an excellent point to expand beyond just vehicle traffic, that's something we can do going forward as a request to applicants early in their process.
Sure.
And then, sorry, just one other thing I'll add to the use of the Parks, Recreation and Culture Fund. We've been collecting that money for a number of years, similar to the Affordable Housing Fund. I don't know the exact value there, but we do need to come to council, probably sit down with Mr. Snyder, discuss projects and see how those funds could be allocated. But Mr. Kushner's right, the current DCC bylaw doesn't have the tunnel extension as part of it, but it would be entirely within council's purview to use the Parks, Rec and Culture funds to assist in some sort of multimodal transportation connection along the tunnel extension.
Thanks for that. And if I could just add one more thing. Another idea that would be really useful for developers, especially in a place with so many buses going by, is to offer you know, bus passes included in their rent. And I think that would be looked on very favorably by council and would certainly help out getting cars off the road and lowering our costs for car infrastructure. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much. Next we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and thanks very much, staff, for putting this together, this report. I think a number of the questions I had have been answered or partially answered. I just wanted to follow up a bit on what Councillor Hillian was asking about those 6 units, and I was wondering if staff knew which of the units they would be, whether it be 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, studios, or the micro units. And the other question I had is, it looked like there was a limit of 10 years for which they would be in a sub-market rent. And I'm wondering what the possibility might be of extending that somewhat.
I don't know, is this a question for you, Ian, or Matthew?
I can speak to it. Through Mayor, through CEO to Mayor and Council. So as the offer calculates, it's based on a 1 bedroom or less unit or an income. So it would be for one of the micro suites or the 1 bedroom units. As far as the 10-year limit on the agreement, I think that's something we could look at extending. I'm not, maybe I could ask Ian to jump in there if there's any implications of that in terms of the housing agreement.
No, I think that's well within council's purview as well to set the conditions that they're willing to accept their proposal on. Staff can certainly go back and speak to the applicant about extending that, whether that's for 20 years or in perpetuity, and see what kind of feedback we get, and then bring that forward again at the time of the public hearing.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks very much, staff. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Councillor Morin.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yes, some of my questions also have been partially answered. Just further to what Councillor Cole Hamilton was saying, when I saw, well, first I was happy to see the rental tenure introduced. That was great. And interestingly, as I was starting to read the document, I was thinking, oh, I wonder if we can get some lower rents in this development. And then, of course, I saw that had been proposed, but I was concerned with the micro units and 1-bedroom, that possibly this proposed rent would be attached to those. And frankly, that's not affordable for, I mean, for a micro unit, which is, I mean, I don't even know how you can get smaller than a studio, but you know, people who are paying $800 a month right now are not considering that affordable. So I wouldn't mind going back to the drawing board a little bit more on that aspect in terms of those units being offered, and perhaps bumping the number up a bit and having a bit of a mix as well. Just having a look at that. Other than that, everything else that folks have said, I'm in agreement with. Thank you.
All right, and Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, a couple comments in regards to the 6 units at $812 plus per month. I think that's not really something that's going to benefit very many people at all, if any. Similar to Councillor Morin's comments, studio and micro units are very tiny, and I can't even fathom that they're going to be trying to charge $800 for anybody to pay that. But regardless of that, I do support Councillor Morin's comments on exploring it and maybe suggesting some of those 1-bedrooms to be in that range. That would make a little bit more sense. Secondly, to me, I look at this project and I see that there's much more that could have been done with this piece of land. I'm actually, in some ways, very disappointed that this piece of property is going to be used strictly for the use of residential and not having a mix of commercial residential. I think this would have been a key spot to try to add some professional type offices that are desperately needed in that area, whether it's dentists, doctors, legal, etc. There are so many possibilities that could have been there. And what we're seeing now is 100+ units to compound with the other multiple hundreds of units that are in the East Courtenay area, which to me are all battling for the same group of people, these very small, tiny places that are talking about trying to be attractive to students. Well, the school itself, North Island College, is already expanding their school to offer the dorms and to that kind of living. So I am very worried of how are these units going to be filled in the future, and we are not really addressing traffic issues. And the fact that we don't have the commercial space that on this particular property, it does worry me that people are going to have to actually drive to the other side of town and cross the bridges in order to, or walk or cycle or whatever use, but they're going to have to access professional buildings on the other side of the community, and that's going to become a much more growing problem, and we're going to have more congestion and more issues. And if we just see residential without any kind of commercial mix, we're going to really have significant problems, in my opinion.
All right, thanks. And Councillor McCullum.
Thank you again. Yeah, I have to say that I certainly agree with Councillor Theos's comments that a multi-use residential or commercial mixed with residential would have been a great thing to see in this area. I mean, but we don't have that much control over what gets presented to us. But I'm wondering if staff can comment if there are levers that the city could use in order to encourage applications that do have a more mixed use bent, I guess.
Mr. Allen, yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'll start, I guess, with Matt, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks for the question through the CEO to Mayor and Council. So, I mean, the most common one, control land uses, is zoning, and then the community plan, which feeds into that which I guess is the root of how the zoning is set up. So I think having that direction and policy would be one way to do it. But I guess backing up to a couple of things, one of the proposals that I had said is occurring in the immediate area on Hunt Road is a hotel proposal. So that shows that there is mixing of use. Across the street from that proposal is a large addition to an existing engineering firm office. So I think there's a lot of residential being proposed in the community in this immediate area. There is still mixing of uses, and for some of the commercial space, we've also seen large buildings vacant simply because there's not demand. So I guess I'd just add those couple points.
Great, thanks. And yeah, I am in support of the development. I mean, it's a great opportunity to see some infill happen in what's essentially a parking lot, but we've had a number of applications for 3- and 4-story buildings, and it just kind of raises the question that, are we missing something? That it rarely is an application for a mixed use, but maybe that'll also fall out of our OCP process. The final question I wanted to ask was in the kind of drawings that were provided to give us an idea of how big of a building we're talking about. It doesn't, I couldn't, at least if it was there, I may have missed it. I didn't find anything that showed it in relation to the apartment building that's behind it. Can you give us a sense of how much bigger the building is, or rather how much taller it will be than the apartment building behind?
Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, so if we're referring to the Washington apartment building, it's about the same length as that building. Of course, this proposed building is 5 stories, so it will be a taller building. In terms of length, it's approximately the same.
Great, thanks.
And Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just thinking about, I know we don't have, obviously, we're not privy to the financial plan of the developer, but I'm wondering about the 5 stories. You know, at what point do you, you know, have a bit more leverage financially in order to add some of the things that we've discussed? And I don't know if Mr. Fitzgerald knows, or whether 6 stories would be, oh, we don't have, sorry. I guess I'm just wondering in terms of incentive for the developer to accommodate some of these rental units, you know, at which, where the sweet spot is in terms of stories. If you know the answer to that, I don't know. In terms of financially.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of factors at play there. I think this building really maximizes the site in many ways, and it has things like has to accommodate things like parking, and the developers need some pretty creative ways to also deal with things like amenity spaces with rooftop patios and balconies and stuff like that. So I think you know, there's probably not much ability to make the building higher without going back to the drawing board. One of the options in the report is to request additional information. So if council wishes, we could go back to the developer and request additional clarification on issues as the units offered as affordable units.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And I mean, of course, they can let us know, you know, what might be workable there. But I think it would be interesting to know that information at some point. I've heard a lot of discussion from folks around, you know, whether you actually do save money, you know, at what point in terms of stories is it financially a benefit? So anyway, I just thought that might be a way to help make the financial case. Thanks.
All right, thanks. And we have Councillor Healing. Ian, did you have your hand up? Did you want to add?
Yeah, thanks. If I can just add to the discussion on sort of what's the sweet spot for amenities. I think it would be good, and we've talked a bit about this before, and through our OCP, we can certainly do it, is to have good, strong policy up front and direction, because then it helps the developer through their performa stage, take a look at what the land values are, what they're willing to pay, servicing costs, all those other things come into their overall cost of development. And then you also run into, you may add another story, but not be able to fit other amenities. In particular, the one that's always an issue is parking spaces. So the more units, under current models anyways, the more parking you need. There is flexibility as you get into different sites, and we enhance our other transportation alternatives. But it is a bit of a challenge without strong policy to provide good guidance around that.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian, David Allen, did you have something to add? I saw your hand there as well. Yeah, that was my real hand, actually. But thanks, Mayor. No, and there's also issues related to fire protections. Often there's a maximum number of stories that can be protected without the use of sprinklers, and so those are also factors that need to be considered. Excellent, thanks. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I had a question about rainwater management and the underground parking. Is that truly subgrade? And was it difficult to do the sort of the water management for this site? I know it's pretty close to a spot that often gets flooded out in heavy rain because it technically is in a floodplain in essence. Is that a challenge? Is there anything creative being used to deal with the water that's going to fall on this site?
Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks for the question. So regarding the parkade, it's predominantly below grade, but it's also sort of used to balance the differences in the topography of the site. So part of it would be partially above grade. As far as the stormwater management, this is outside of the floodplain, but the detailed design for our extension will be completed as part of the next phase, which would be the engineering of the building and the detailed civil design.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize it was out of the floodplain. I just know that when we get heavy rains and things back up, I know the Superstore Plaza often gets flooded. This is probably a little higher than that. Thanks.
All right, and Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. There will be a public hearing, and we will have an opportunity, I assume, to hear from the developer at that time, both in response to some of the issues people have brought up and other questions about the financing and such. But in the meantime, I just want to remind us that we've been crying out for rental housing, and this is rental housing. And I don't want to quibble too much about what it does have or doesn't have, but I think Mr. Buck made a good point. It came up in relation to a number of other properties that we were looking at in this side of the city, where we'd like to see more affordable housing built in, but currently we don't have the incentives or the intent built in, and that's what our official community plan is about. So it's inevitable that we're going to have some developments that continue before we've got all that in place. But it's important what sort of signals we send to people about the projects that we want to see approved. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hillian. And yeah, I think, when we talk about how long we've been asking for more rental units, as long as I can recall. And so it is good to see that we do have some projects and I get Councillor Theos does have the concern that maybe we have too many in the pipe, but I think right now there's such a pent up demand that it's certainly going to be a while before we satisfy that demand completely. So, Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I echo Councillor Hillian's comments, and I guess one of the thoughts that I had in relation to rental is, will it be part of the conditions of this building that it not be short-term rental, that it be longer-term rental, just to ensure that these don't move immediately into that market?
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the developer, the other buildings they operate in town and across the island, they're all longer term rentals. So I don't have any concern that this would be converted to a short term rental.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Excellent. I don't see any further hands going up right now. I think we've had a pretty fulsome discussion. I think the motion's been first and seconded. I'll just poll council now to see if you're affirmative, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Helian,
In favor.
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In support of moving it to the public hearing. Thank you.
Excellent, and I'm in favor as well, so that's unanimous. So excellent. Thanks very much for that great discussion. Moving along, we do have the RCMP municipal policing contract.
I'm happy to move that if you like.
Thank you.
I'll move that based on today's staff report entitled the 2020-2021 RCMP municipal contract expenditure cap final approval, that council approve option 1 with an established strength of 31.4 members and provides for an expenditure cap of $6,375,449, of which Courtenay is responsible for 90%.
Second.
All right, we had a few people seconded. Did you get that, Wendy? Excellent. All right, and I'll maybe hand it over to Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll turn this over to Jennifer Nelson, our Director of Financial Services, who can summarize the report and take questions from council.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great, thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So the purpose of this report is to provide final approval to the City of Courtenay RCMP municipal policing expenditure cap for 2020-2021 contract year. This is an annual requirement in compliance with the terms of the municipal policing agreement. So council has already provided approval in principle to the 2020-2021 expenditure cap in July, and nothing has changed since then. We have incorporated this into the 2020 budget, which was finally adopted on April 6th. And so all the details around the funding are in the report. But essentially, the request here is to approve the expenditure cap of $6.375449 million, of which 90% is the responsibility of the City of Courtenay, which totals $5,737,904. So maybe I'll just open it up for any questions.
Excellent. Are there any questions at all? Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and thanks for the report. I just have a quick question. I think I know the answer, but I just want it clarified that the spending cap is based on our approved number of RCMP members and is not related to our vacancy, our predicted vacancy rate. Is that correct?
That is correct. So that cap is based on the 31.4 members. So our budget reflects the vacancy rate. So we do reduce that down.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any further questions at this moment in time. Seeing none, I'll call a question. I'll poll council. Just let me know if you're in favor or opposed. Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Helian.
In favor?
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Support.
And I'm in favor as well. So that's everyone. Thanks very much. And moving right along, we have the grant and aid requests and opportunity for flow-through funds with the Comox Valley Community Foundation.
Mr. Mayor, I'll need to disqualify myself as one of the organizations in the report. I have a connection with, so there's the appearance of conflict. I might come up with a way to suggest how we could get around that in future, but for now, I'll vacate the screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm in the same boat, Mr. Mayor. So I'll excuse myself for now. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to move it if that's okay with council.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move that, I'm sorry.
Councillor McCollum?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask whether or not it's better that we hear the report before we decide, because there's,
Sure.
you know, two possible routes that we could be going with here.
Fair enough. Mr. Allen, do you want to start with the report?
Sure, I'll turn it over to Jennifer Nelson. I can say that really the reason for the change in format for this report is related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's obviously a pretty big factor. But in any event, I'll turn it over to Jennifer Nelson, who can summarize the report's recommendation and take questions.
All right.
Okay, thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So what this report does is provides a listing of all the organizations that applied for a grant and aid in 2020. So we received 19 applications this year, and page 97 of your agenda outlines the details of those applicants. So Council will recall that, we delayed the 2020 intake this year because the Finance Select Committee reviewed the policy, and so we updated the policy with some new criteria and put a cap on the annual amount, which Council then adopted late last year. We then proceeded to do our annual intake with a deadline of January 31st, 2020. And in addition to that, through the Finance Select Committee to Council, staff were asked to pursue an opportunity to create an agreement with the Comox Valley Community Foundation to administer this program for us in future years, which we did. So we did pursue that. We were in the process of reviewing the draft. However, COVID then happened in March. And so we have processed all the applications and prepared a report for you with I guess, option one being what those payments might look like based on your policy. But given the fact that now our casino has closed and we aren't sure of what those revenue streams are going to look like from the casino, and that the gaming revenue is the money that we use to fund this grant and aid program every year, we're suggesting that we think about, council maybe think about not releasing the grant and aid payments based on their current policy this year, and hold on to those funds to maybe address other opportunities they may wish to, or at least wait until we know what the gaming fund revenue is going to look like for 2020. And we're also suggesting that in light of the COVID-19 situation, that we put that agreement on hold with the Comox Valley Community Foundation until we're through this and we start to see those revenue streams come back, committing ourselves to future annual lump sum payments. Might be best to wait until we look and we've reviewed the gaming fund in the coming year for the next financial year. So I'll just open it up to questions, but I'll also note that I do have Annie Berard here in my office. She's 6 feet away from me. She oversaw this process. She's compiled all the applications and reviewed them in detail, and she's here to assist with any questions if you have any relating to any of the particular applicants.
Excellent. And maybe I'll just start because with one quick comment or question, and that's we did do a funding for Lush and other organizations within the homelessness coalition like the food bank, et cetera, for I believe 17,500 back in March, and it came from gaming funds. So I just don't know if that's captured anywhere in the report as well.
Yeah, so we did note that in the report. That was an emergency fund that we paid out through the 2020 annual allocation that we have. So we didn't reduce the 50,000 that we have outlined. We kind of had that as a separate amount of council's discretionary funds in 2020. And maybe just to note high level too, that council is always spending the previous year's gaming revenue. So that's a really good thing for the situation, because you've been conservative in that way and only used last year's revenue. That this closure of the casino will not impact your current year commitments that you've made. But that being said, we're not sure what that's going to look like for next year, so being cautious.
Thanks very much. And Councillor McCullum.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I want to acknowledge what a great job was done on this report. I really appreciated the level of detail and also the thought that went into whether or not we should pause the process and consider whether proceeding with these grant and aids is the best use of the gaming funds, considering the situation that we're now in. I don't think there's any person in our community that would think that the world that we're dealing with today is the same as when we put the call out for these grant and aids. And looking forward, what our plan is for gaming revenue next year, there's close to $1 million, and much of it provides funding for regular operations in our community that we may or may not receive as the casino is currently shut. And it really does beg the question whether it is a good use of current resources to fund our current applications, which is it's a tough decision. There's a lot of very worthy community groups that we've been very fortunate to be able to support through this program for a number of years, and to not be able to hand them some financial support right now is a tough one to mull over. But I also am very cognizant of the fact that if we are giving this money out this year, it will likely directly impact what we're needing to ask taxpayers to pay on their next year's property taxes. So at this point, I think that the cautious approach would probably be to go with what staff have recommended, and also give ourselves a little bit of leeway to be able to respond to further community requests when it comes to our COVID response. It's likely that the last emergency request that we have will not be the last, and we're not really getting to the finish line of what's going on right now. So I guess my one question is, in terms of being able to provide more emergency funding, would we look at that case by case basis, and each request would come to a council meeting? Is that how staff are expecting to proceed?
If I might weigh in, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
I think staff were thinking that not spending that money would allow you to determine whether there was other COVID-related, pandemic-related expenditures that might be more helpful in the current circumstances. We did apply through the regional EOC for funding for the $17,500 that council had already agreed to contribute. Those monies were not supported in terms of funding through the request, the EOC request. And I don't anticipate, frankly, that similar types of funding would necessarily be forthcoming. So that is all the more reason to, I guess, be cautious and conservative in terms of the use of the gaming funds, especially in light of the fact that we're not sure when that revenue will come back into the mix.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I'll go ahead and move option 2, if that's okay with council. I'll move that staff not remit grant and aid payments in 2020 and keep the funds available as emergency funds for organizations supporting those in need during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that staff be directed to put the flow-through funds agreement with the Comox Valley Community Foundation on hold and reconsider later in 2021 for the 2022 once there is more certainty around future gaming year funding revenue.
Second that.
Second that.
Confused.
Excellent. All right, we've had a pretty fulsome discussion. Are there any further comments or questions around it? I think it captures kind of where we are right now, and really thankful to staff for putting their minds to it and helping us respond as quickly as we have. But realizing that using those funds
that there's a finite capacity there, and especially as we may not get reimbursed for those, even though we may think that we should be if it's a provincial jurisdiction, and we're just really trying to fill a gap. But again, we don't know where we're going to be a month or 6 months or a year down the road. So I think cautious is certainly the way to go. So having said that, I'll just poll council again, and hopefully I won't poll the people who are not here. So Councillor Cole-Hamilton?
In favor.
Councillor Frisch?
In favor.
Councillor McCullum?
In favor.
Councillor Theos?
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So thanks everybody for the discussion. And I guess we can ask Councillor Hillian and Councillor Morin to return to the table. Excellent. And next we have the letter of endorsement from the Saanich Council regarding the financial hardship property tax deferment program. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And thanks for bringing this forward. I'm not actually sure if it was a council member or yourself, but very much appreciated. And I think it's worth, endorsing this sentiment to the province. When you do look at their current programs available, it does cover a lot of people. It covers families with children. It covers seniors. But as has been discussed, that might leave some people falling through the cracks. And so expanding this program a little bit might just be what's needed to help those few people that do need it. I also believe that there are many people in the community who will still be able to pay their taxes. And so hopefully everything works out for the best for everyone, and happy to make a motion later on asking us to write a similar letter if you're interested.
Excellent. Yeah, that was the point. Yeah, I did bring this up. I've been bringing it up with the province probably for the last month since we first started having weekly phone calls with Minister Robertson. Basically, from their perspective, they have kept saying that they're going to take it under advisement. And I think that pressure has gotten stronger and stronger. I'd actually asked for a letter to be put on for this week's agenda, and then the mayor of or the Saanich Council actually got their letter out first. So it just seemed to be less effort for us to support their letter or create another one that basically copy and paste what they've written. And on our last conversation, Ms. Robertson, really, and I think again, I can't really say how grateful I am and how I know they're doing a fantastic job. But their perspective when we brought it up last time was the fact that about 70% of residential properties are already captured within the existing program, so the seniors and those with families. But again, 30% are falling through the cracks, and that's a pretty big number. And that's why I think it does make sense for us to move forward and write a letter similar to this to make sure that voice gets heard loud and clear at the provincial level to make sure that we're looking out for everybody. And I don't see any questions or comments. So Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I wasn't sure if you saw me there. So yeah, I'll go ahead and I move that we, the Courtenay Council, write a similar letter to the government asking for the reinstatement of their financial hardship property tax deferment program.
Second.
Excellent. And again, we're not asking to sort of recreate a wheel. This is something that was used back in 2008, 2009. So it's really just reinstating that same program. And again, most estimates are saying that, what we have coming forward is going to be most likely a little bit more significant than what happened in 2008 and 2009. So Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll support the resolution. I'm just wondering though if staff have any comment on if there's a point where the numbers of people that apply to defer their taxes seriously threatens the ability of the city to function, and if we know what that point is.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And through the mayor, again, I will turn this back to Jennifer Nelson.
Hi, thanks through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So when people defer their property taxes, they do so through the province, and the province remits the funds to us. So it really doesn't have a cash flow financial effect on us, maybe by a couple of weeks in terms of getting our money from the province. But the more people that defer is not going to impact our operations. Maybe just I'll add just a little bit of information about the deferment program too. Is there is a requirement that owners of their properties have a certain equity level in their home, just something to note. And most of the deferments that we receive through the city are for the age 55 and older. We receive very few for the families with young children. So we also would anticipate that likely a lot of those people aren't aware of the program. So could be something that we communicate out a little more heavily this tax season.
Thanks very much. That's helpful to know. And so it's really a budgetary question for the province and not for us.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, again, I fully understand where, you know, they're really trying to make this up as they go along, and they've been very honest about that. But I think, you know, when we have provided some pressure and some leadership and guidance in some cases, they have stepped up to the plate. So I think it's really just letting them know how significant we think this is to make sure they do it. Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is in regards to the Hardship Act. Would the people that defer through the Hardship Act still have to pay interest on their deferrals? And secondly, people that just bought in the last few years, just moving forward, I was interested in knowing that when you have a deferral, you'd have to have equity in the home in order to accept that deferral. I'm just very interested in knowing that if the home values decrease moving forward for the next few years and this Hardship Act continues to be in place, are people that have less equity in their home, as in terms of what the value is compared to what they owe, are they not going to be qualified for this Hardship Act?
So again, over to Jennifer, if you're able to answer those questions.
Yeah, so I do know the province has different equity levels for the different programs. So I believe it's 25% for the age 55 and older, and then they drop it down for families. So it's only 15%. I mean, getting into the real specifics of it, those would be questions for the province in terms of how they look at certain equity levels in properties. Some people can take out additional lines of credit. There's all kinds of different things that can happen on people's specific financial situation. So I can't really speak to that, but I will say that I believe the financial hardship when I'm just going, it was quite some time ago in 2009, but I believe that one also had a lower threshold. And I'm not sure, but I think in order for people to even get mortgages these days, the equity amount is a little higher too. So yeah, each one would be very specific and individual depending on that person's situation. And again, the province would be setting those standards, not the city.
Sorry, I was just also asking about interest charged on people with that defer through the hardship.
I would anticipate there would be a small interest charge because that is what occurs for the other two ones. But again, that would be the province. If they were to enact that, they would determine that level. They are the ones that tell us what that interest amount is. So.
Yeah, I think Councillor Theos, if you had a comment that you wanted in the letter about the interest, this would be the time to put that forward. Mr. Allen.
I raised both my real hand and my unreal hand. I do recall some discussion and some numbers, some interest rates, Councillor Theos, and I think they're pretty modest. So I think they certainly are not high, and so the impact would be reasonable, I think, for those that did want to take advantage of any of those deferral programs.
Okay, thank you for the answers, and thanks for the opportunity, Mayor.
You bet. Councillor McCollum.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm wondering if staff would think it reasonable and appropriate that we provide some information about this program with our when we mail our tax notices this year.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, so we can certainly do that. There's also ways too that we can communicate through our communications side, through our website and Facebook, that other such programs. The province actually is moving their deferment program onto an online version this year. It's a brand new rollout that they're doing. So there's going to be more communication around that coming from them as well. But we can certainly, we are working on an insert to put in with our tax notices this year, outlining, ways for people to pay remotely and how to claim their homeowner grant. We can certainly highlight the deferment as well.
That would be great. Thanks.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch, did you have your hand up? Okay. All right, I think it's been a good fulsome discussion. I think it's relatively clear. Any questions on staff? Seems good. All right, I'll poll council again. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian. Seems good.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In support.
And I'm in favor as well. So thank you, council, for doing that. I do appreciate it. Oh, there's some weird feedback happening. I'm not sure. Oh, it might be Councillor Hillian. I'm just going to mute you, Councillor Hillian. I'm not sure exactly where the weird audio is coming from, but next we have the RCMP annual performance plan acknowledgement of consultation.
Move receipt. Is that acceptable?
Yep. I think for right now, and that's been seconded. Maybe I'll hand it over to Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, they're attached to the submission from Inspector Curvers for this year is last year's letter that resulted from last year's process. And so it's just there for information, and really don't have much to add. This is something that happens every year. It does look very similar to what was on last year, and I seem to recall council had some discussion and there was a follow-up resolution and discussion, I think, in camera with the inspector. And so I'm not sure where council wants to go, if council wishes to meet with Inspector Curvers, and how that would work exactly in this sort of circumstance. I'm not sure. Maybe he would have to join either an open or in-camera discussion, depending on the nature of the discussion through this process. So I'll leave it up to council to give us some guidance.
All right, and yeah, I think in the past years we've had a more fulsome list of things for the RCMP, and when Inspector Curvers gave us a list last year, we had a conversation that was more specific than the two items that are listed on here. But in the end, I think his perspective was everything else that we brought up is kind of captured by these two items, and so. And that might be where having a more fulsome discussion afterwards, we can still have that with them. It may be worthwhile to actually get an update from him sometime in the near future. Just so you know, he is on the leaders call that we have every week. So I am asking him questions about how things are evolving. I think one of the bigger things that we have in the city is the encampments. But just kind of, he is being very, I think, forthright and engaging. But if council wishes, we could put that invite out to them. But back to this list, Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just curious you know, whether we could have a follow-up on this, some of the issues that we brought forward last year, just to see, you know, any outcomes from that discussion. I know regarding COVID, there are some issues that have kind of amplified, particularly domestic violence or interrelationship violence. And also we've had reports that alcohol consumption is way up, which we haven't seen crime come to fruition from that yet, but that might be something just to kind of have on our radar, because we do have a lot of alcohol related crime generally, and if consumption is up, that could be an area. So I guess I would be interested in having some kind of a discussion about the priorities going forward, and sort of a review of last year, and in light of COVID and some new challenges, in addition to our ongoing challenges that you've mentioned. I think that would be helpful. It'd be good to know whether these priorities from last year, you know, what progress was made, that kind of thing. Just to finish off, I know that there was some concern that some of the folks who were in custody were being released during COVID. And I think that did include some prolific offenders, is what we heard from the RCMP. So whether that's creating any challenges for our local detachment, that would be, I think it would be a good discussion to have whenever it's possible. Thanks.
Okay, and we did include the letter that we sent last year, and on page 102, the second paragraph from the bottom kind of talks about the extra things that kind of, you know, delving into the list a little bit more clearly, which was crime reduction strategies, homelessness encampments, domestic violence, sexual assault, and organized crime linked to drug and opioid use. So it might be useful to leave that language probably intact the way it is, and then add to that maybe just another sentence around the impact of COVID-19 in relation to those things, but also adding to it the potential release of prolific offenders, just so we're capturing, I think, what was talked about here. Does that sound fair, Councillor Moore?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Hilling, did I miss you? Or I thought I saw your hand. Oh, and then I thought I could hear you, but I can't hear you either.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also, Councillor Moran covered all the bases. I also wanted to apologize for hitting the wrong button that got the meeting happening twice on my screen. So my apologies for that added audio feedback.
Fair enough. Well, this is why I think starting next week we'll all meet up at around 12:45 and have a bit of a check-in. That sounds like a great idea. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I would agree that a check-in with the inspector would be helpful. I obviously not sure if we can say when that would be, but because we're tracking our motions and reviewing them on a monthly basis, I wonder if it'd be worthwhile just putting out a motion saying that we would request another meeting following the relaxation of this of the rules due to COVID here, and at least have it on the books. That makes sense to staff.
Well, I might just jump in just quickly. I'm just not sure that we need to necessarily wait. If he can jump in on a Zoom meeting, we can have that conversation a little bit sooner rather than later. Again, I think he's been pretty effective at communicating even when it's just by phone. So we might not have to wait too terribly long because, again, we don't really have a timeline right now. Mr. Allen, sorry, I jumped in right before you.
No, that's okay. I think your answer is fine from my perspective. Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if it was once a month updates or it was supposed to be every 2 or 3 months that but that's a separate matter. We can talk about
Mm.
that later on. I did have one observation, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I'd heard a story on CBC radio about the alcohol consumption data. And one of the things, there was some debate about, yes, consumption has gone up, certainly, I guess, while people are isolating and perhaps sharing through processes like these, both their libations and their discussion. But also restaurants have closed. And so you're seeing a significant drop in the amount of alcohol consumption that would go, through bars and pubs and restaurants. So I think it'd be interesting to really dig into that data a little bit more and find out, how accurate that is.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I recall Inspector Curvers at pretty much every update that he's given the leaders anyways is sort of saying that, they're still responding to regular calls and, they're really trying to prioritize. So they're just going out to the more severe calls. So things that they might not consider as serious, just to keep their inspectors and constables safer, but also keeping the public safer if there's not much need for rolling a police vehicle out. So I don't see any further questions or comments. Are staff okay with, do we need a motion or anything, or do we feel pretty okay with the letter and an invite?
I think we're okay with the letter and invite. And I will certainly follow up directly myself with Inspector Curvers.
Excellent. All right. Anybody not in favor of receiving this letter? If not, then we will consider that all received. And we do have a resolution to go in camera.
I'll move that, Mr. Mayor, that notice is hereby given that a special in-camera meeting closed to the public will be held April 27th, 2020 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting pursuant to subsection 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, and 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting proposed provision of a municipal service, those subsections of the community charter.
All right.
Second.
Okay, that's been seconded by Councillor Morin, I believe. And I'll just pull Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Moving right along, we do have bylaws. We did move past the reports and updates of council. We did agree that we weren't going to be doing them, and we only have a half hour for our in-camera meeting. So I think we're possibly a little bit behind, but we'll go into bylaws for first and second reading.
I can do that one if you'd like. I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2990-2020, which is a bylaw to amend zoning to develop a 118 unit rental apartment building with amenities at 1025 Ryan Road, pass first and second reading.
Second.
And I'd make a comment if I could, or a question.
Okay.
I was wondering, since we had been talking about, the desire to see more mixed use, if we might include in this comprehensive development zone the ability to build commercial space on the main level. Does staff think that's possible to put into this? If to future proof, if someday someone wants to renovate the first floor of this and do something like that, does that make any sense?
If I might weigh in there, I'll turn this over to Ian Buck, I think, or Matthew, either one.
So maybe I'll take a stab at it first. CAO to Mayor and Council. So the idea behind the CD, or the comprehensive development zone, is that it reflects the specific proposal. And in that case, it's for an apartment building. However, if in the future somebody had wanted to take this building and do something different with it, they always have the option to to apply for a subsequent zoning amendment to add office use or to add a retail component. So I think I'd recommend just leaving it there. And if plans change in the future developer would have that option to make that amendment.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Give me 1 second here. Councillor Frisch, you've already talked. Did that get moved and seconded?
I second it.
Excellent. So I'm going to poll council. Councillor Cole-Hamilton,
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
Absolutely in favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor?
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
and Councillor Theo.
Favor.
Excellent. And I'm in favor as well. And that brings us to first, second, and third reading of the tax rates bylaw 3002-2020.
I can move it.
Excellent.
I'll move the tax rates bylaw number 3002-2020, a bylaw to establish the property value taxation rates for 2020 pass first, second, and third reading.
Seconded.
Excellent. And any questions or comments regarding that? Seeing none, I'll poll council again, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton,
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor?
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
In favor.
and I'm in favor as well. Excellent. And lastly, we have for final adoption, the tax rates bylaw.
I'll move that tax rates bylaw number 3002-2020, a bylaw to establish the property value taxation rates for 2020 be finally adopted.
Second.
All right. And again, I'll poll council for final adoption. Councillor Cole-Hamilton,
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
In favor.
Councillor Hillian,
In favor?
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Moran,
In favor.
Councillor Theos,
In favor.
and I'm in favor as well. And only one thing left on the agenda.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Excellent. Anyone opposed to moving adjournment? Speak now, or we are going to move in camera, and we will just stand by until we're no longer live.